we are discussing the fifth chapter of the second canto, the cause of all causes. Here we have to discuss the 17 to 20, where the distinction between the Lord and the living entities is being explained. So here also, as we discussed before itself, based on the creation principle itself, the distinction between the Lord and the living entities is explained. So till 18th verse is fine. Okay, whatever discussed is been okay. In the 19th verse, okay, this is Karya Karana Kartritve Dravya Jnana Kriyashrayaha Badhanti Nityada Muktam Mainam Purusham Gunaha. So there are two categories of three terminologies. One is Karya, Karana and Kartritva. Okay. Then there is Dravya, Jnana and Kriya. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada also introduces Adhibhuta, Adhyatma and Adhidaiva. Okay. So I'll just read some sections from this purport. Then I'll go to the 23rd verse and I'll read that purport. Discussing the 19th text. We have this these two sets of terminologies, Karya, Karana, Kartritva, Dravya, Jnana and Kriya. Okay. So we will read specific portions from this purport. And Srila Prabhupada, as I said, also introduces this Adhidaiva, Adhyatma and Adhibhuta. So we'll discuss that also. We'll just read from this purport. Then we'll go to the purport of the 23rd verse. Okay, there Srila Prabhupada is very, very clear on what actually is the cause, the effect and the controller, the controlling principle. So he's very clear about that. So we'll discuss that. Then we'll come back to this 19th verse again. So which will make things very clear. So Srila Prabhupada in this purport writes that, okay, let's see the translation first. These three modes of material nature being further manifested as matter, knowledge and activities, which is Dravya, Jnana and Kriya, put the eternally transcendental living entity under conditions of cause and effect and make him responsible for such activities. So this is Dravya, this is Jnana and this is your Kriya. And the modes of nature manifest as Dravya, Jnana and Kriya, and they put the eternally transcendent living entity under the conditions of cause, which is Karana, effect, which is Karya, and make him responsible for such activities, which is Kartritva, okay, the Kartru principle. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, external energy of the Lord covers up the pure knowledge of the living entities eternally existing with him. But the covering is so constant that it appears that the conditioned souls are eternally ignorant. Okay, so this covering is the illusory energy of the Lord, the external energy of the Lord. External energy manifested as if materially produced. This also we discussed before, that external energy looks like it is materially produced, but it's actually the energy of the Lord. Whatever we see around us is not, the energy does not exist on its own. Okay, it is coming from the Supreme Lord. By the covering power of the material energy, the material scientist cannot look beyond the material causes. Okay, till this point it's fine. So Srila Prabhupada writes that behind the material manifestation, there are Adhibhuta, Adhyatma and Adhideva actions which the conditioned soul in the mode of ignorance cannot see. The Adhibhuta manifestation entails repetitions of birth and death with old age and disease. The Adhyatma manifestation conditions the spirit soul, and the Adhideva manifestation is the controlling system. Okay, so till this point, you just remember this. Adhibhuta is repetition of birth and death, okay, which is related to the body. Adhyatma conditions the spirit soul, and Adhideva is the controlling system. Okay, so we will go to the 23rd verse and we'll read the purport from here. So Srila Prabhupada writes that material creations of every description are more or less due to the development of the mode of passion. The Mahatattva is the principle of material creation, and when it is agitated by the will of the Supreme, at first the modes of passion and goodness are prominent, and afterwards the mode of passion, being generated in due course from material activities of different varieties, becomes prominent, and the living entities are thus involved more and more in ignorance. All material creation by the living entities is therefore initiated by the mode of passion. Okay, so the cause or the Karana is actually related to Rajoguna. Okay, so the cause, the Karana or the Adhyatma principle is related to Rajoguna, not to Sattva-guna. Okay. Initially we discussed that as Sattva-guna because the knowledge is covered first and then he becomes embodied by the matter, Dravya. Okay, we had that kind of discussion, but actually Prabhupada is very clear here that material creation by the living entities is initiated by the mode of passion. Okay, so it's the Kriya, Dravya, Jnana and Kriya is there, right? The Kriya is what is the cause. The Kriya is your Adhyatma. And in the age of Kali, when the mode of passion is most prominent, material activities of different varieties in the name of advancement of human civilization take place. And the living entities become more and more involved in forgetting their real identity, the spiritual nature. So they get entangled in, because they have forgotten their real nature, they get entangled in body. Okay, so therefore they undergo repeated birth and death. So this is the effect. And if you remember, we also discussed that mode of passion, if one is involved in passion, if one is influenced by the Rajoguna, then ultimately it leads him to the mode of ignorance. Even creation also happens in that way. First there is Mahatattva, which is arising from goodness. Then there is Sutra Tattva, which is passion. And ultimately that leads the way to Ahankara, which is in ignorance. Okay, so passion is the ultimate basis of creation, is what Srila Prabhupada writes here. And he says the gross material elements are Adibhutam. Their maintenance is Adidaivam, which is the controlling principle. And the initiator of the material activities is called Adhyatma, who is influenced by the mode of passion. Okay, so let's go back to 19 and see this. We have Dravya, Kriya and Jnana. So the cause should be Kriya, which is initiated by the mode of passion. So as Srila Prabhupada writes, all activities or all the starting point of a person's material journey is when he is in the mode of passion. Okay, again let's go back to the 23rd verse and read that same line. He says, all material creation by the living entities is therefore initiated by the mode of passion. Okay, so therefore the cause is mode of passion. Okay, the cause is mode of passion, the creation is mode of passion. So here, when we say Karya, Karana and Kartritva, the Karana should be, is related to Adhyatma, okay, which is the mode of passion. Fine? Okay, actually this I should remove. This is not correct. Adhyatma is, so this is the person who is responsible, he is the initiator of creation. Okay. Now, because of this cause, because he initiates this material activities, then the effect is that he has to undergo repeated birth and death. Birth, death, old age and disease. So, Adibhuta manifestation entails repetitions of birth and death with old age and diseases. Adibhuta is related to this Dravya, which is this material elements. The body is made up of material elements. So, repeated birth and death basically means he again and again acquires the body which is made up of material elements. So that is the effect. So one who is engaged in Rajoguna activities, he has to undergo repetition of birth and death. Because Rajoguna means what? From Bhagavad Gita we understand that Rajoguna means that he wants to enjoy the fruits of his activities. Correct? So a person who is in Rajoguna, his whole motivation is that he wants to enjoy. He wants to work and the results of those activities he wants to enjoy for himself. That is what drives him to become passionate, to do work. So, if he has to enjoy, if he has a desire to enjoy his activities, then he has to get repeated because the desires are varied. There are several desires, multifarious desires. He should have multifarious amounts of bodies to enjoy, to accomplish all those desires, to fulfill all those desires. So, the cause being activities, the initiator of material activities becomes the cause, and the effect is the repetition of birth and death. And the principle who is overseeing both these is the Adidaiva principle, who is kind of supervising these activities. Okay. So, and subsequently in further verses in this same chapter, it's definitely mentioned that the controlling demigods are generated from mode of goodness. So, Adidaiva or jnana, which also comes from goodness, from sattva-guna, sattam sanjayate jnana. So when he says dravya, jnana and kriya, this jnana is correlated with the sattva-guna, which then the sattva-guna is used to, or sattva-guna creates the controlling demigods. So Adideva principle refers to sattva-guna or jnana. Adhyatma principle refers to kriya or the mode of passion. And Adibhuta principle refers to this dravya or the effect. So karya is your Adibhuta principle, cause, karna is Adhyatma, and Adideva, responsibility that the living entity has for his activities, and the controlling system of the demigods, this belongs to Adideva, which is actually in the mode of goodness. Okay, maybe what I can do is, so we have Pradhana, okay, then we have Mahatattva, then within Mahatattva we have, in Mahatattva is the modes are agitated, okay, so there we have goodness, then we have passion, and we have ignorance, okay. So technically our Acharya say this goodness is when Mahatattva itself is created, passion is your Sutra Tattva, then ignorance is your Ahankara, fine. So within Ahankar, we have again the modes of nature again interact. Yeah, we'll come to that. Goodness, then we have passion, and then we have ignorance. We discussed this principle before also, that the modes of nature do not exist purely. The modes of nature are prominent. When they're agitated, sometimes the ignorance is prominent, sometimes goodness is prominent, and sometimes passion is prominent. And within the modes itself, there are three sets of modes. And within those, there are further classification. So its permutation and combination of the three modes is what creates everything within this material world. So we cannot say that one particular item exists purely in goodness, or one particular material object, or one particular, the conditioning of the living entity is purely in goodness, or purely in passion, or purely in ignorance. Because we will see in the 10th chapter that it is said that the human beings are primarily in mode of passion. And within the mode of passion, when goodness is most prominent, then he has the qualifications of a Brahmana. Within that passion, when his passion is more prominent, passion, then it's Kshatriya. Within passion, when there's passion plus ignorance, that Vaishya. And within that passion, when this ignorance is most prominent, then he becomes a Shudra. So human being, the species of human being itself is supposed to be in mode of passion. And within that mode of passion, then there are Varna classifications that is also within that. Are you able to understand?
Previously, what you told was under ignorance, three modes comes.
So under ignorance, there are these three modes. This is what I'm going to explain now. Okay. I'm just giving an example that within ignorance, there are three modes. And within the three modes, there are other three modes also. So within this goodness also, you'll have ignorance, passion, and goodness. Within passion also, you have goodness, passion, and ignorance. Within ignorance also, you have goodness, passion, and ignorance. Like that, it goes like a tree. Within each mode, you have three modes. And within each of these three modes, there's other three modes. So they are very complexly mixed. Okay, so that is how it is. The modes, so when we say 84 lakh species of life, 84 these species of life are created based on the modes, how they have combined. So it cannot be very simple. And we will see in the third canto, Srila Prabhupada will write that three modes combine with the three modes to become 9. And these 9 modes combine with further 3 modes to become 81. Okay. In third canto it comes. So now there are only 3 modes. So 3 modes are not combining with anything else. They are combining amongst themselves. So within the 3 modes, there are individual modes. Within each mode, there is 3 modes. And within each of them, there are other 3 modes also. So they all combine together to complexly form the material elements, 84 lakh species of life, whatever see around us, the nature, water, fire, and all those things are, they contain all 3, but something is prominent and something is less prominent. Like that. So none of the material elements exist purely in goodness or purely in passion or purely in ignorance. This pure goodness, passion, ignorance only are the coverings. They are there only in the coverings of the universe. Anyway, we don't get confused with that. We'll see that later. But at this point of time, just understand that within this material world, the 3 modes are always there. They're always mixed. And that which becomes prominent, then that decides of what is the consciousness of the living entity. If goodness is prominent, then he's a Brahmana. Like that. So now we are talking about creation. Okay, we're not talking about human beings. I just gave this as an example for you to understand. We are talking about creation now. So we have passion is where your karna comes. Correct? Passion is the initiator of the material activities. Then the cause. The effect is ignorance. Okay, then we have karya. And goodness will be the controlling principle, the kartru principle. Okay, so now karna refers to your kriya. Right? Passion is kriya. Then this will be your dravya, the material bodies. Correct? Because of the karana, we attain repeated birth and death, which is repetition of acquiring material bodies. Then this will be jnana, because from goodness knowledge arises. The controlling demigods are created from goodness only. Sattva-guna, basically. So jnana, it refers to the kartru principle, which is your adidaiva. Right? Then this your adhyatma, the one who does the actual work through his senses. Then this will be your adhibhuta principle. Okay. So did we miss anything? Let us see this. Okay, yeah, I also wrote mind, intelligence, matter. So we also discussed that intelligence comes from passion, and we discussed how. Okay, matter comes from ignorance, the other gross matter, or you can say false ego, which is ignorance basically. It's the same thing. Then mind comes from goodness. Okay, demigods are created from goodness. Passion, there are different species of life. Yeah, karmendriyas and gyanendriyas are created from passion. Okay, so it's knowledge acquiring senses, working senses, living force. Okay, so all that is created from passion. And ignorance is your elements. The elements are created from it. Correct? The gross elements are created from ignorance. So this is how it is. So what we have pradhana, from that Mahatattva comes, then it has, in Mahatattva the modes are agitated, we have goodness, passion and ignorance. Within ignorance, we have goodness, passion, ignorance again. And then this is how the creation goes about it. Okay, there's a cause, there's an effect, and there's a controlling principle on that. And then the manifestation of matter, dravya, then kriya, okay, the activities, and jnana, they correspond to each of these. And that is where we have this adideva, adhyatma, and adibhuta principle. Okay. So is that clear now?
Yes.
Fine. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he tells the same thing. He says, the states of the gunas are present as adibhuta, which is karya, adhyatma, which is karana, and adidaiva, which is kartrutva. The gunas are the shelter of or causes of matter, dravya, the senses, kriya, and the devatas, jnana. The gunas bind the jiva by these identities. So the same thing is what Srila Prabhupada writes. They are after all manifestations of the conditioned state, and the human being's freedom from such a conditioned state is the highest perfectional attainment. And I think it's the translation itself. Prabhupada writes, these three modes of material nature being further manifested as matter, knowledge and activities put the eternally transcendent living entity under conditions of cause and effect and make him responsible for such activities. So they are the three modes, the gunas, which bind the living entity. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur tells the same things. The gunas bind the jiva by these identities. Okay, so adhibhuta refers to your karya, the effect. Adhyatma refers to karna, the cause. And adideva is the controlling principle, who basically controls everything, the activities also. Okay. And in the 20th verse, it's mentioned that, O Brahmana Narada, the superseer, the transcendent Lord, is beyond the perception of the material senses of the living entities because of the above mentioned three modes of nature. But he is the controller of everyone, including me. Okay. So now the Lord is beyond the three modes of nature. So because the living entity is conditioned by the three modes, and in it has this adibhuta, adhyatma, adideva, and dravya, jnana and kriya, these things are covering the living entity. So therefore he cannot understand the Lord. Because the Lord is beyond all this. He is beyond the three modes. And he is the controller of everyone, including me. So Srila Prabhupada specifically concentrates on the impersonalist here. And he says the impersonalist cannot approach the Lord because they are also covered by the three modes of material nature. So they cannot approach the personality of Godhead. The Lord is not approachable by everyone because he is curtained by his Yogamaya potency. This misconception of formlessness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is due to Yogamaya curtain of the Lord. But the devotees can fully realize the all blissful transcendental form of the Lord. Fine. So now this particular translation, or rather if you read this, there is the living entity, okay, and within the living entity there is one who is controlled and one who is controller. The demigods are the controllers and the living entity is the controlled, and then the distinction between these two is the material body which they have. This will come into the 10th chapter. And beyond all these three principles of Adibhuta, Adideva and Adhyatma, then there is a Supreme Lord who is the controller of all these three. So this will be the basis for what we are going to discuss in the 10th chapter. Okay, so especially in the 8th verse of 10th chapter, we will see this in detail, but it's going to come. Fine, so is this clear? Now it's clear. Oh, yes.
Just one question.
Yes.
As you told now that main initiator of activities for human beings is passion.
Yes.
From passion
Or
only,
actually the whole creation, it is passion.
passion.
Hmm.
So from passion only, all if somebody under the passion is in the mode of goodness, he is Brahmana.
Hmm.
If somebody is under passion,
Yeah, this will come in the 10th chapter. Yes.
Kshatriya.
Hmm.
So who is just like told that under goodness also three modes are there, under passion also three
Yes.
modes are there, under ignorance also three modes are there.
Yes.
Under goodness, three
The
modes.
demigods will come. Demigods in goodness. Urdham Gachanti Sattvastha. They are situated at the top. So demigods are in goodness. That's what we discussed, no? Sattva-guna, Adideva principle. The demigods, they are in goodness. Human beings are in passion. And lower species, below that, they are all in ignorance. They are in ignorance. And within the demigods also, there are different distinctions. Okay. So within the demigods, I don't know. I don't have a Shastric reference for this. But my understanding, or I can probably say my speculation, is that the rishis among the demigods, okay, they will be in goodness. Okay, so those demigods who are engaged in sense gratificatory activities, there will be goodness plus passion, and there will be someone in goodness and ignorance also. I don't have a reference for that, but then I think this is how we can understand.
Because as I have heard in some lecture that animals, they are also classified in three modes.
Yeah, they are also in
example is
goodness.
given cow as
Yes.
sattva-guna,
Yes,
lion is in
yes, passion,
monkey
yes,
is ignorance.
yes.
So that will come under ignorance. These
That will
three
come
are-
under ignorance, yes. So they are primarily in ignorance. Okay, cow is primarily in ignorance, but then it has very regulated activities. Okay, specific regulated activities, not very passionate, not very ignorant also, but in a nice way. Okay, so cows are in goodness like that. So modes act like this. So one becomes prominent, and within that there are three modes, out of which one becomes prominent. And within that there are three modes in which one becomes prominent. And that determines the nature of the living entity, the swabhava of the conditioned soul, not the living entity, of the conditioned soul. And this complex combination of the modes, it arises because of the desire of the living entity, based on what he desires. Okay, the desires have to be fulfilled. Okay, the Supreme Lord fulfills the desires of all his living entities based upon his desires and then his activities or his reactions or his karma. Based on that, his activities, his desires are fulfilled. So all this is under the purview of the modes of nature. Okay, so everything is a complex combination of the modes. Material nature means these three modes. So when we say that someone's beyond the three modes, then whatever are the effects of the three modes is beyond all of that. So there is effect. The complex combination of the modes, they create lots of effect. What we see around us is basically the effect of the modes, their complex combination. This chair, this woodwork, or this light, this room, whatever we see around us, it is all a combination of the modes. Okay. So these are all effects of the modes of nature, is what we are seeing around us. So ultimately it's all the three modes. which we see around us. When they are engaged in the service of the Lord, then they lose the effect of the modes and they become transcendental. That's why those paraphernalia which is used for the deity worship. Okay, although these paraphernalia are made, looks like they are made from material elements, but because they are engaged in the service of the Lord, they lose their nature, their material nature, and they attain the transcendental nature. Because they are engaged, whatever comes in contact with the Supreme Lord loses its material nature. It becomes transcendental. It comes under the internal potency of the Lord. Okay, so that is how it works. So we have these three. So everything is a combination of the modes. And this Adhibhuta Adhyatma Adhideva we'll see in the 10th chapter.